Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
I got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there, and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh, no.
Amateur Traveler, episode 476. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about a destination we talked about 474 episodes ago. We talk about po' boys and Indians, but neither of those kind. We talk about jazz, beignets, and Bourbon Street as we go to New Orleans, Louisiana. Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. With no further ado, let's talk about New Orleans. I'd like to welcome to the show Jill Robinson, a freelance journalist from DangerJillRobinson.com, who has come to talk to us about New Orleans. Jill, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And I feel like saying finally welcome to the show because we've been friends for a little while by this point and just finally got around to talking about where we should talk about. We have done a show on New Orleans. I'm not saying that it has been a while, but Katrina hadn't hit New Orleans yet, and this is the 10-year anniversary this year. So it's possible that some things have changed.
Definitely things have changed. I mean, things got obviously very bad during and after Katrina. And a lot of the city still has some issues in terms of like the outer areas that just haven't been focused on for rebuilding. But the city has bounced back in a fantastic way. And I think that if folks haven't gone yet since Katrina, this is definitely the time to go.
Well, and I haven't been since Katrina. And the place I stayed, we had a friend who was actually working for the New Orleans Hornets at the time, and he was living in a brand new apartment building right near the cruise terminal, and it is gone. It was so severely damaged by the hurricane that it was torn down. So I know that large portions of the city I assume I would recognize, but why should someone go to New Orleans? Let's start with the obvious.
Well, like the Earl King song says, there ain't no city like New Orleans. It's the least American of cities, and I use American in air quotes here, least American of cities in the United States. It was so clearly foreign to this country after the American purchase that it was really easy for residents to maintain a cultural continuity at a time when the rest of the country was becoming more and more homogenized. which is not to say that other cities just don't have their own personality, but New Orleans has a very distinctly different personality from the rest of the country. There are elements of American history that many Americans and even New Orleanians know nothing about. And so for folks who haven't been, they owe it to themselves to check it out, especially as we just mentioned, we're at the 10-year anniversary of Hurricane Katrina on August 28th. Remember when people didn't understand why New Orleans should make the effort to rebuild? You will when you go.
And the other question we should ask getting started here is how many syllables in the phrase New Orleans?
Everyone is going to say it differently. In general, the residents say New Orleans.
And sometimes we'll get it down to 2 syllables, New Orleans. But
yeah, so it's funny because once upon a time, people who don't live there seem to think that it's like N''AWLINS, like Nolans. I don't know anyone who lives there and was born there or has lived there for a while that actually does that.
Okay.
So it was kind of a thing to do, but I'm not hearing people say that. I hear more people say New Orleans. I hear people see it kind of, like you said, kind of New Orleans. I hear there's some old-time Creoles that say New Orleans. And then in songs, you can't. In some cases, you have to say New Orleans because it rhymes with City of Dreams and other things. So you're going to hear it all over the place, and it's totally fine to call it what you want to call it. Just don't call it the Big Easy. A lot of locals don't like that.
And what kind of itinerary do you recommend for somebody traveling to New Orleans?
If they're there for a week and I were new to the city and had that time to spend, I'd focus on a different neighborhood every day. So everybody wants to hit the French Quarter. So take all of your first day and explore because you know you want to do it. On day 2, you move over. So in New Orleans, you tend to orient yourself by the river and the lake and uptown and downtown. So if you're standing in the river, which of course you're not going to, but if you've got the map in front of you, you've got your feet in the river, you're looking straight at the French Quarter.
So I'm facing west.
Yeah. So then left is uptown, right is downtown. So even more downtown from the quarter, bordering that are the Marigny and Bywater neighborhoods. So I do that on day 2. Day 3 is for the Terme, which is behind the French Quarter, CBD, which is Central Business District, and Warehouse District, and those are to the left, which is a little more uptown than the French Quarter. And so then on day 4, I'd haul my butt all the way uptown, which includes the Garden District, but the area is so large it may want a couple days depending on your speed. There are mansions, there are really nice, good music clubs. I'll get into that a little bit later. So it's all spread out. So I would definitely take time in the different neighborhoods. After that, like we're about in the last 2 days now, I'd take a day trip outside the city along the River Road. And then at the end, go back to anything you really loved. Repeats are totally permitted. And so it depends on what you like to do, but great places for families in the city are Audubon Park, City Park, Audubon Aquarium of the Americas, Audubon Insectarium. You're getting a theme here with Audubon. Louisiana Children's Museum and the French Market. Music fans. Best tip for music fans is to pick up a copy of Offbeat magazine, which is free and available inside nearly any bar and cafe. Music listings are ordered by the date, the time, location, and genre, so it's really easy to figure out what you want to hear. And then shoppers, which I'm not, but people are. Shoppers love the French Quarter and Magazine Street. And food is amazing everywhere, so forget any chain restaurant and just discover something really tasty from New Orleans.
Excellent. Now let's go through that all again, but slower. So we're starting in the French Quarter, and I think a lot of people think the French Quarter is just 2 blocks long.
Yeah, it's not. French Quarter is, I don't know exactly the block, but I would say the French Quarter, probably 5 by 10 blocks approximately. And, I'm probably off by a couple numbers one way or the other, but the French Quarter is kind of ground zero for tourism in New Orleans. And so it's historic, it's got drinks and food, it's got a lot of entertainment, music, everything. So that's why so many people filter there. But after having gone a number of years, it's nice to kind of get through the French Quarter, but then I have focused on other areas of the city, which allow me to see a little bit more of the depth of the local scene.
So if I ask the random person on the street about New Orleans,
and their impression of New Orleans, I get the feeling, I haven't done this, maybe we should try it, that a lot of people think New Orleans is where you go to drink and flash your boobs.
Yeah, exactly.
And that doesn't even happen all over the French Quarter.
Right. And actually not every day either.
Right.
So that's one thing that guidebooks, of course, guidebooks recommend going to Bourbon Street in the French Quarter, and there's nothing wrong with it. I think everyone should see the crazy part of Bourbon Street there. But unless you're visiting,
it depends on whether you're bringing with kids or not.
Yeah, and also, but it gets old too. I mean, unless you're visiting New Orleans only to party, you really only need to see that segment of Bourbon Street once. There are other parts of the city that are more interesting, where you can get a view of the local way of life and get your frosty beverage. And so you shouldn't waste your entire trip on Bourbon Street unless that is the reason you're going. And if you're looking for boobs and beads, go around Mardi Gras time, because that's when it's happening.
Okay. And then if that's not what we're looking for, where else would we see? What else should we do in the French Quarter?
The French Quarter, I think history buffs, and anyone really, a few sites in and around the quarter are the Cabildo, which is just right up front, and it's got museum information and stuff that are specific to New Orleans and Louisiana. The old U.S.
This
Mint.
Is by the big, by the main square in the French Quarter? Okay.
It's by Jefferson Square, right.
I was afraid of the name, thanks.
The old U.S. Mint is, okay, let's reorient ourselves and stand in the river. The old U.S. Mint is to the right side of the French Quarter, so it's the far right side. It has some regular mint information about why that was interesting, why that was helpful at the time, as well as rotating exhibits. The Historic New Orleans Collection, I believe their headquarters is on Royal Street, but the collection is a number of houses and buildings within the quarter, and I believe they also go outside the quarter. So doing tours with the Historic New Orleans Collection is really interesting. And outside of the quarter, but just a short distance outside in the CBD, is the National World War II Museum.
Right.
Now, you wouldn't think that New Orleans had anything to do with World War II, but of course they had people who went to war from New Orleans, just like everywhere else in the country. But there's some really interesting local bits of information that kind of lend to the overall display and exhibits that they have there, and it's fantastic. I'm not necessarily a World War II buff. I was really impressed when I went.
Oh, and I am, and it was fascinating. You know why that's in New Orleans.
I forget. It
used to be the D-Day Museum.
Right.
And New Orleans is the home of the Higgins boat.
That's one of the things I didn't know until I went there.
Yeah, it's the home of the landing craft, basically, and that's why the D-Day Museum, which then grew out of just D-Day and turned into the World War II Museum in the last 10 years. So I've seen the D-Day Museum before it was the World War II Museum. But yeah, that's the historic tie to New Orleans, is the landing craft.
And didn't they test the Higgins boats in Lake Pontchartrain?
Probably, because, yeah, they're a very shallow water craft, and shallow water craft come out of what you need in that area. So that's why New Orleans.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I want to take a break here and hear from our sponsor. I'm sponsoring this episode myself. I've got a new course that is more travel related, a video course that is coming up. It's still in development, and it's about getting started hosting on Airbnb. My wife and I have started hosting on Airbnb just this year, and for the last 3 or 4 months, we have paid our mortgage, or mostly paid our mortgage, with 2 rooms of our house being rented out on Airbnb. We've had someone here nearly constantly, and we've had good experiences. And so we want to share what we have learned, either through our direct experiences or through some friends who have stayed in Airbnbs up to 150 nights a year. Hopefully this is something that you can find useful, either for just interacting with other travelers. A lot of our travelers have been world travelers, or to make some money to travel yourself. If you're interested, go to amateurtraveler.com/Airbnb and sign up on a list, and I will let you know when that course is released.
You already started to move us out of the French Quarter. I've got to get an opinion here before we leave the French Quarter. Café du Monde beignets, yes or no?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think, however, so it's been a while since I've had beignets at Café du Monde, and what I used to think was silly.
And what is a beignet, first of all?
Oh, beignet is essentially it's a deep fried donut, but it's square and it doesn't have the hole. So it's deep fried dough, which is always good, and with powdered sugar like crazy. So my best tip, if you're going to have them, I don't care where you have them, but best tip is when you hold, try not to wear all black or all dark colors, because as careful as you are, you're going to wear powdered sugar. It's just going to happen.
We have a picture of my family like bent over trying to eat beignets without getting powdered sugar on ourselves.
That also is a tip. So when you pick the beignet up, make sure if you're going to inhale or exhale, do it before you put your mouth to the beignet, because you could either inhale the powdered sugar or exhale it all over your clothes. But Café du Monde, they make great beignets. It's incredibly popular. It used to be
cliche.
That, yeah, but that's okay.
Doesn't mean I wouldn't do it.
No, it's fine. I think my best tip for, besides the eating stuff, is don't go at the height of the day. Don't go when there's a line of tourists down the block to get a seat at Café du Monde. I love going, like if I'm going to a club and I'm hearing maybe an 8 o'clock band or a 9 o'clock band, and then I'm wandering through the quarter, go at 10, go at 11, go for your little snack at night, or go early in the morning if you're a runner and that's your cool down kind of thing to do, to treat yourself for doing your early morning exercise. But going in the middle of the day and standing out with the line of tourists, it's just, I find better things to do.
Well, and the whole place, since I've been there, I believe has burned down in, oddly enough, a grease fire and been rebuilt. So it's a brand new place. Looks like the old, as I understand.
You wouldn't know that it is different than the last time you saw it.
And then the only other thing I can think of in the French Quarter is, do they still have the market down there?
Yes.
Closer to the river?
The French market is fantastic. So French market is a combination of food stalls where you can get snacks or lunch. Not a lot of counters, but a lot of good places where you can grab. Like if you're really into souvenirs that are edible, like hot sauce from New Orleans or things like that, you can get it there. Also, it's almost like a flea market. You get T-shirts and little jewelry trinkets and hats and music and things like that. So yeah, French market is really interesting to wander through.
Excellent. Where to next?
Oh, let's see. Well, for me, I really like slowing down and blending in when I'm in the city. I've been about 40 times since Katrina.
Oh my, wow.
So in 10 years, I've been about 40 times. And prior to that, I've probably been about 10 to 15. So all these things we're talking about, like Café du Monde, and I say go at night, these are things that I used to do all the time. The first time I went to New Orleans, I stayed in the French Quarter. I hung out only in the French Quarter. I went to New Orleans Jazz Festival. And all those things are fantastic, but I've kind of moved on from that and discovered new things. So now I stay with friends in the Marigny, which, if you're standing in the river, it's the neighborhood to the right of the French Quarter. So my daily walking route covers that neighborhood, plus the Bywater, the Treme, and the French Quarter. So I will still run through the French Quarter to see people or to hit a bar or something like that. But slowing down for me allows me to see the mix of things that I might miss if I had a planned itinerary. Like things that the guidebooks and tourists who are focused only on the French Quarter tend to miss would be those neighborhoods like the Treme, the Marigny, and the Bywater. They're much better than they used to be about focusing outside of the French Quarter and Garden District. And that HBO TV show that ran for 3 years, Treme, which, hey, amazingly enough, named after the neighborhood Treme. Although it didn't focus only on the Treme, but it just focused on kind of that neighborhood and characters coming back after Katrina. But those areas are still just nice, not as heavily traveled places that are also important to New Orleans history. So doing a little tour through here, like for a good take on the Treme, I had an article in April in the San Francisco Chronicle, and I have another one coming up. I have another one in August for Afar. Treme is a place that is largely residential, but it has a couple of really interesting museums. Backstreet Cultural Museum, or something like that. We just call it Backstreet. But that is a museum that focuses on Mardi Gras Indians and the kind of the walking clubs that were really, really important in African-American New Orleans earlier on and to this day.
Let's pause here a little bit.
Yeah.
Mardi Gras Indians.
Oh, yeah.
We're not talking about Native Americans.
We are not. It's a little disputed exactly how the Mardi Gras Indians started, but slaves, as they escaped, had a little bit of a kind of brotherhood with Native Americans because they're getting outside of the city. So you're going, or outside of plantations. So you're going to places where hopefully you're not going to be found. And Native Americans were very hospitable to escaped slaves. And so over time, when African American culture continued on in the city, and it always did throughout this time. You had free people of color in New Orleans. It had a kind of marriage system called plissage. So it was actually, I guess, more, in some ways, easier to be African American in New Orleans than in other places in the South, but in other ways, of course, not. And equal in terms of poor treatment during slavery. But when African Americans were finding their own identity, keeping their own identity, they kind of looked to the Native Americans to essentially thank them, reward them for their relationship. And they had these, right around Mardi Gras time, they would not parade, but really kind of walk around. It was almost like gangs, but not so violent. So you had people, groups of people from different areas of the city who would dress up as Native Americans. They tended to kind of get their costuming ideas from the Great Plains Indians. So it's not exactly perfectly that area, but they would dress up and then they would kind of go out and show everyone how strong they were, how you shouldn't mess with them. And it actually started out as a way to kind of fight with other groups. Over time, however, it's now just a way to show off your work. After Mardi Gras every year, they take their suits apart, unless they're going to put it in a museum, and they start on the new suit for the next year. And so you have a big chief, and you have a spy boy, and you have a wild man, and you have a bunch of different positions within the Mardi Gras Indian Society where they're parading at Mardi Gras time, and they also parade on St. John's Day, which is, I think, around the 15th of March. It's somewhere mid-March.
Well, I think one of the things that points out is when people think of Mardi Gras, they just think of going down and drinking, and there really is quite a depth to the Mardi Gras culture.
Very much. I misspoke. It's not St. John's Day. It's St. Joseph's Day.
Okay.
I get my saints mixed up sometimes. It's out of practice. But and I think Mardi Gras, especially, people think, this is again going back to the Bourbon Street thing. People think that because TV cameras are really excited about showing Bourbon Street and the crowds and people hanging off the balconies and throwing beads and maybe the boobs, that people seem to think that Mardi Gras is really only about that. But that's like about 1% of Mardi Gras. Carnival season starts in January. It runs through Mardi Gras, which, of course, because it's a Lenten calendar, it changes every year.
Right.
And so it's really more of a family event. And going to parades with friends and their children has made me, over the years, understand what it's really about. So sure, you can go to that 5-block stretch of Bourbon Street that's just nuts and have your fun time. It's pretty hard to walk around there. I have gone, and I've just gone to the edges of it where it starts to get incredibly crowded, and then I'll just watch for a few minutes and go, okay, I'm going to go somewhere else now. But it's also good because you got the parades, but then once you know things like about the Mardi Gras Indians, there's also Skull and Bones gangs, which is a somewhat of an offshoot of Mardi Gras Indians, but they dress up as skeletons, and they parade around and essentially wake you up on Mardi Gras Day in some neighborhoods, of course, because they're area based. And so if someone's knocking on your door really early in the morning on Mardi Gras, unless it's your drunk friend who's already been out all night, it might be a Skull and Bones gang, and their purpose is to wander around and remind people that but for caution and good fortune, we could end up like them. So they're just saying, hey, it's really nice that you're here on Mardi Gras, but remember, you could be like us next year.
Interesting.
So it's a little bit like Day of the Dead in a way,
right.
In a New Orleans kind of way.
You were in the middle of talking about Tremaine and the museum, and then I got you distracted into Mardi Gras Indians.
Oh, that's fine. Okay, I was just giving you a tour. So Tremaine, I kind of covered a little bit. The Marigny, getting back to that first neighborhood on the right, from the quarter. It's home to Frenchman Street, which is full of excellent music clubs. It's also got obviously good bars, good food, just like pretty much every neighborhood in the city. The Bywater, which is...
But before you move on, you say excellent music clubs. Do you have a favorite or two?
Yeah. Frenchman Street, DBA, is one of my favorites.
Why?
I just love the space. It's also... I think the folks who run that also have a DBA in New York. And just the interior is so...
And you say DBA, and I'm doing business as, and I feel I may have the wrong acronym.
Right. It's Don't Bother Asking.
Okay.
That, in fact, I've learned that by saying, so is DBA doing business as? They say, no, it's Don't Bother Asking. You're like, oh, okay, great, sorry. I'm sure they answer that question a number of times every night. But the interior is beautiful. It's just wood, and they've got mirrors angled so that you can kind of see almost everything happening because it's a U-shaped bar. And so if you're on the other side of the bar from the stage... It's not always easy to see, but the way they have the mirrors angled, you feel like you are kind of part of the performance, even if you're not like right up front. And like many bars in New Orleans, dogs are invited in. And so if you are traveling with your dog, then you don't have to worry about leaving your dog in the hotel or, oh my gosh, we may have to stand outside and listen to the music. You can bring your dog in.
Interesting. And favorite restaurant in the area?
One of them is gone now. And it changed names, and now I can't remember what it is because I just have this well-worn path on the sidewalk, and I just walk there.
What street should we go to check out restaurants?
Oh, Frenchmen.
Okay.
So, and it's Frenchmen, plural, M-E-N, not M-A-N, because it's for the French men who lived there. But yeah, there are, depending on what I feel like, and there's Middle Eastern food there, there's old Creole food there, there's the Praline Connection, which is soul food and really good. There's probably about 7 to 10 restaurants just on like a 4-block stretch of Frenchmen.
Okay.
The R Bar, the Royal Street Bar and Inn, it also is a place to stay. They have a couple of places upstairs. That's a great bar there. They have I believe it's Monday nights, you can get your hair cut. By someone who's not drunk, which is a good thing.
That seems like that would be a good safety tip in terms of
they have haircut. It's like haircut and a shot specials, and then when it's crawfish season, they have crawfish boils about once a week.
Okay. I've just never thought, hey, let's go out to a bar. I really need a haircut.
Hey, that one thing in New Orleans is combination businesses and bars is pretty common. So they have a bar that's in a grocery store or, I have friends who belong to the YMCA. I don't know if it's the YMCA, but it's their local health club that they go to work out. There's a bar in there. Okay. New Orleans has a way of making sure that drinks are always available. You don't have to partake, but it is also one of the reasons why people don't get quite a lot of work done in a business day.
Well, I know we were surprised when we first went to, I guess we've just been there the once, when we went to New Orleans and there was the drive-through daiquiri place. But it's legal if you don't put in the straw, is our understanding.
Right, or you have to tape the hole or the covering to show that you haven't used it, which is hilarious. I, of course, know people who get around that pretty easily, but, you shouldn't drink and drive. It's just... And one of the things about New Orleans, speaking of drinking and driving, is it's a pretty flat city. So New Orleans is great for walkers and cyclists, but it's also pretty spread out. So what I do is I keep the telephone number of a local cab company, specifically United, and that number is 504-522-9771. And I just keep it programmed into my phone. So if I've gone for a really long walk and I'm too tired to walk back, or I'm at a club at night and I feel like it's too late for me to walk back, or it's too hot. I mean, I go in the summer sometimes and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't really feel like sweating even 3 more little drops. I'll just call United and have them come pick me up. Buses and streetcars are also great ways to get to and from neighborhoods, but in a pinch, a cab is your best bet.
Well, and since we're talking about calling a cab, there are some neighborhoods I know that when you and I were talking, you would not walk in at night.
Yeah, there are parts of to be honest, I mean, it's funny because people will ask me about crime in New Orleans. And it's a United States city that has some crime issues, as does New York, as well as a bunch of other large cities. So I don't think that it's necessarily unique to New Orleans that you have to worry about walking at night or walking in certain.
Well, it is one of the cities in the U.S. with the highest crime rate. Let's be more specific.
It's true.
It is higher than New York.
Yeah, so I'm not whitewashing that. But at the same time, some very simple tips like we all have when we travel to places that we don't know well is don't wear your fanciest jewelry.
Sure.
If you're going to get drunk, don't walk by yourself because someone who's looking for a mark is going to find you and see you stumbling all over the street. First of all, even if somebody doesn't get you, you might like trip on the sidewalk, and so you could hurt yourself anyway.
Sure.
That's another reason. But it used to be the rule that back of Bourbon Street in the quarter was not necessarily a place you wanted to be at night by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how that is now. I tend to, if at nighttime, and unless it's a really well-lit part of the quarter, I just tend to walk with a friend. So I don't need like a group of people, but if it's late at night, I've probably been out listening to music and drinking. And so if I've been drinking, I figure my odds of really recognizing a dangerous situation aren't maybe as good as they would be if I hadn't been drinking.
Sure.
And so having another person to maybe deter someone who's looking to rip me off is a good idea. CBD and the Warehouse District has some dark corners. Every neighborhood has some areas where there might be more crime-ridden than others. There was a time in some of the bars in New Orleans. Some of the bars in New Orleans have kind of game machines like you do, like slot machines.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a time in New Orleans when a lot of those bars would get held up because they had that extra money.
Got it.
I haven't heard that happening lately, but it's one of those things where be savvy, use your smarts, don't be drunk and stumbling late at night without having a friend with you, or just grab a cab if you have to walk a distance.
And you've been there, you say 40 times since Katrina.
Since Katrina.
Been robbed.
Never.
Okay. Let's
not
leave it on that note too. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, maybe in some cases I'm a little more cautious than maybe I need to be, but my guy friends who live in New Orleans are very thoughtful about where I go at night by myself. And so oftentimes, even if it's just after dusk, and I say, okay, I'm going home, meaning from the bar to my friend's house 6 blocks away, and my friend Glenn will say, are you going by yourself? And I'll say, yeah, it's fine. It's not dark yet. And he says, no, I'll walk with you.
Okay. Excellent. So we were in the Marais.
We're in the Marigny.
Marigny, sorry.
Yeah. So that was Frenchman Street. Further left, which is downriver, is the Bywater. It's a little more relaxed than the Marigny. It's getting a little more gentrified since Katrina. So there are plenty of great restaurants and music clubs. The music club I would go to in the Marigny is called Vaughn's. And Kermit Ruffins, who some people may recognize from the TV show Treme, he has played at Vaughn's on, I forget what night it is, Thursday night, for years and years and years. But not just Kermit. Vaughn's always has a good band there. There's an essentially outdoor wine bar. It's like a garden with chairs, plastic chairs and tables, and you go in and you buy a bottle of wine and share it with your friends. Sometimes they have somebody making food there. It's called Bacchanal, and that's also in the Bywater.
Now, are these neighborhoods similar we didn't talk about the look of the French Quarter.
Yeah.
I mean, the very French look. It really doesn't look like most American cities, and it has that wrought iron grills and balconies and such. Is that carried on into the neighborhoods you've been talking about?
Somewhat. What you'll see more as you exit the French Quarter is you'll still see the wrought iron used in terms of fences and some balcony work. But generally the houses are what we call double shotgun, single shotgun, camelback.
So shotgun meaning tall, thin, going back from the street. Straight
back, yeah. So like if one were to fire a shotgun through the first open door and all the doors were open to the back, if you were a good shot, would go all the way through to the backyard, in theory. And then
not that we encourage that behavior.
No, a shotgun double is a double-sized shotgun house.
Right.
So, and oftentimes these houses are just much more colorful. I mean, you think French Quarter is colorful, but you go into the Marigny and the Bywater and you'll get some really brightly colored homes. They're not as fancy schmancy, humongous that you'll see in Uptown and the Garden District.
Okay.
But you'll also see these sprinkled in. So the shotgun doubles, you'll see these homes also in the Uptown. It's not just mansions Uptown. Uptown is a huge area. And so you'll have some neighborhoods and some streets, especially St. Charles. So around St. Charles, you'll see a lot of just really big, beautiful mansions.
Sure.
And then you'll cut down a couple blocks and you'll see more modest, but still really beautiful, smaller New Orleans homes.
Yeah, I remember seeing the mansions off the streetcar.
Yeah. And that's the street that the streetcar runs on.
Right. Where next?
Well, one thing that I think people wonder about where they should stay when they're in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. And so, like I mentioned, it's a great walking and cycling city, but so staying in a central location like the Quarter or the CBD will allow you to kind of go out like your bicycle wheel spokes and see more things without having to resort to a cab. Some of the larger hotels that still have great character. I know we all know about great large hotels that are chains and are fantastic because they have a very consistent level of service. But oftentimes when I'm staying in a city, and especially in New Orleans, I want to stay in a hotel that really feels like New Orleans. And so some of the larger hotels that have good character are Hotel Monteleone and the Soniat House in the Quarter,
okay,
as well as Windsor Court Hotel and International House in the CBD. And as I kind of already established, well, I stay with friends, but I like staying just out of the fray where the neighborhood's quiet, but you're close enough to duck in and out of the action when you want. And so since the Marigny is my favorite spot, I've also noticed that there are a handful of great small inns and B&Bs. And before I made the friends that I have now, which I made right after Katrina, I used to stay at a B&B called La Maison Marigny, and that's on Bourbon Street, but just across the main avenue from the French Quarter. Okay. So it allows you to kind of get a feel of what it's like to live there and then still be able to run out and do the fun things in the city.
Excellent.
Should we get to food?
Yes, we need to get there before we run out of time.
Okay. So the cool thing about New Orleans is people seem to think that it's only Creole and Cajun food, but the city's food has roots in French cuisine, Creole and Cajun traditions, and the influence of African cooks to also Italian immigrants. And so to just do a quick breakdown of Creole and Cajun, both cuisines came by way of France, and each uses roux, which is a flour browned with butter, and other local ingredients, but their paths to New Orleans cuisine really differ. So Creoles were born in South Louisiana. They blended with Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, German, and African groups that settled in large numbers in the region. But Cajuns settled in southwest Louisiana after they were expelled from Nova Scotia in the 1700s.
Right.
So Cajun food is largely country food and not often presented as the refined city food that Creole cooking is considered. So when you think about gumbo, which is a New Orleans specialty, it's used in both Creole and Cajun food. Creole cuisine uses okra as a thickener, and Cajun cuisine uses filet or ground sassafras leaves. Jambalaya is another New Orleans kind of specific dish. It's like a one-pot paella with meat, vegetables, rice, and stock. That's strictly Creole.
Okay.
Cajun dishes are more likely to feature ingredients from the country, like crawfish, and it also tends to use more hot peppers and spices.
I was going to say, now, when I think of Cajun, I think of the Cajun chicken or something, or blackened, exactly, blackened catfish or something like that.
Yeah, that was a Gay Paul thing.
Yep.
Paul Prudhomme, he brought that out and made that famous for Cajun cooking. Mm-hmm. So for folks who are visiting New Orleans, my best advice is to sample the local food in a variety of spots. So some small neighborhood haunts are the Joint for barbecue.
Okay. The
Joint is in the Bywater. Also in the Bywater, Elizabeth's Restaurant. The amazing thing at Elizabeth's Restaurant is praline bacon. I'm not kidding. It's amazing.
So it's a candied bacon.
Yeah, but it's good. And then in the Treme, Dookie Chase has classic soul food.
Okay.
Then larger restaurants to note are, and of course, I'm just naming a few. There are just because I don't name something doesn't mean it's not worth going. It's impossible to list them all. But so larger restaurants like Bayona in the Quarter are a favorite of everybody who goes. And that's Chef Susan Spicer. A restaurant called Cochon, that is in kind of the warehouse district. That highlights authentic Cajun cuisine.
Okay.
Upper Line is uptown. That's contemporary Creole. And Luke in the CBD has old world French and German style food.
Okay.
So I would just say, don't eat at a chain. Eat at a unique New Orleans restaurant, something you can't get somewhere else. Go investigate some local food, even if you're just going and getting some shucked oysters.
Okay. Or a po' boy or something.
Oh, po' boys are awesome. If you get a po' boy and they ask you if you want it dressed, that means everything on it.
And a po' boy is a sandwich.
It is a sandwich. It's like a hero sandwich.
Like a hero or a hoagie or a whatever else we call it, depending on what kind of where you are in the U.S. Subway.
Right.
But excellent. Getting out of the city. You mentioned a couple different places to see.
Mm-hmm. So a favorite side trip to follow is the River Road. And that runs along the banks of the Mississippi between New Orleans and Baton Rouge. And you can see elaborate plantation homes there. If you don't have a car, it's still easy to get there. Tours leave nearly every day from New Orleans. And they include a number of plantations in their excursions. And sometimes it also includes lunch at a plantation.
Okay.
Another place to go that people go, but I think people just think it's the River Road is the only place to go. The Barataria Preserve is in the Jean Lafitte National Historic Park, and it has hiking and canoe trips into the swamp, and it's a really good introduction to the wetlands environment. Even if you don't do anything as exciting as hiking and canoe trips, you can just walk along the boardwalks that wind through the swamp there, and from there you can see egrets and gators and all sorts of other swamp animals.
And probably one of the only National Historic Parks named after a part-time pirate.
Exactly.
What else can you want, really?
Really not a lot.
What's going to surprise me when I go to New Orleans?
Well, I think going back to Mardi Gras, and I don't want to beat that horse too much, but really that Mardi Gras is such a bigger event, and it goes over weeks as opposed to just that one day in those few blocks of Bourbon Street.
Do you have a favorite Mardi Gras parade or event? Let's broaden that from parade.
Crew de Vue runs, I believe it might be 2 weekends prior to Mardi Gras. It depends. Okay. I think it's either 1 week. No, it's 2 weekends prior to Mardi Gras because I'm not always there. That winds through the French Quarter, and that is just irreverent and crazy. So they'll make fun of the mayor. They'll make fun of the governor. It's pretty easy to make fun of them, but they do it in a really great way. And then, let's see, Barkus is also, I think, 2 weekends prior to Mardi Gras, and Barkus is a dog parade.
Oh, okay.
And the you think you've seen great dog costumes? At Barkus, you'll see better dog costumes.
I don't even know if I thought I had seen great dog costumes.
And then, really, like my absolute favorite on Mardi Gras Day, I know a lot of tried and true coverage is about Rex, which is the king of Mardi Gras. But I like seeing Zulu. And Zulu runs also kind of down the uptown area, but it's the heart of Zulu is right around in the Treme, the backside of the French Quarter, down into that neighborhood. And you can hang out there. People are barbecuing. You can buy some barbecue off them. You get to hang out and try to get a Zulu coconut, which is the throw that you want to get. Beads are fine. Beads aren't nothing compared to a Zulu coconut. And they decorate coconuts, and you've got glitter and, the year, and it says Zulu on it. Looking back from my desk, I have 5 Zulu coconuts on my bookshelf.
Excellent. When you were talking about places to eat, the one place I was thinking of that we enjoyed, I don't even know if it's still there, but it's an institution, is the Camilla Grill.
Oh, Camellia Grill.
Camellia Grill. Sorry, yes. I tried to remember what the name of it was. Yeah, over in the other end of St. Charles Avenue.
Right, you're way uptown there. And yeah, absolutely, that's worth going to.
A place where they have literally scrubbed the Formica off the countertops. It's been there for so long.
And just, was it maybe 5 years ago, they opened a Camellia Grill in the Quarter.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, so it's not that same. I mean, it's the same look in general, and you get the same menu. It's not that same feel, but if in a pinch, if you wake up and you're downtown near the Quarter and you really want to go to Camellia Grill, but you just can't haul yourself up to uptown, then you can just go to Camellia Grill in the Quarter.
Excellent. We're going to have to wind this down. I know we have left things out.
Oh, of course.
As we always do, because we just have to for time. Anything else, though, before I get to my last, say, 4 questions that we really should include?
I have to say that New Orleans isn't about speed. So you're just like this show, you're going to have a lot of stuff that you want to cover, and you're not going to be able to cover it all. And so what you need to do is slow down, see beyond the quick glimpse. It's the best way that you can see the real heart and soul of New Orleans. Get your number of things that you absolutely have to see and do, but spend some time, sit outside, watch the city go by, because oftentimes the best parade you're going to get in New Orleans is walking right past you.
You're standing in the prettiest part of New Orleans. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
One of the prettiest places in New Orleans, and where people just don't know about, but it is quiet. There's a little playground with kids, but the oaks, the beautiful trees in this park, and they also have a local little group of Quaker parrots, which are kind of grayish-white parrots, and they tend to hang around here. And so you can hang out in the park and be close to Frenchman Street, but still just get this very quiet city feel with the parrots, which is odd, but it's called Washington Square Park, and it's in the Marigny.
Okay. And I should have asked, but I haven't already. Assuming we're not going to Mardi Gras, we've already talked about Mardi Gras, when would you recommend people go to New Orleans?
I'd back up first and say, what do you want to do there? If
Sure.
you are a festival kind of person, you really want to go for food and music, I would go in spring. It's usually April, French Quarter Festival. It used to be very, very calm and an easy thing to do. Now it's getting bigger. The New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival, which is the last weekend of April and first weekend of May every year, is fantastic, and that's at the fairgrounds. A smaller music festival, which has some great food, but it's in summer, and it's in early August. It's Satchmo Fest.
And you pause when you say, because it's in summer. There's a hesitation as you recommend something in summer in New Orleans, because
It is hot and humid, and if you can handle that, then don't go in summer.
Yep.
I go any time of the year. It's fantastic. And it's just in summer, I just figure, I stay with friends who have a swimming pool. I know what establishments have air conditioning. I stand and walk in the shade, and that's how I survive. So it works for me. But if you just can't deal with the heat and humidity, don't go in the summer. One great time to go to New Orleans that a lot of people don't think about is between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So right after Thanksgiving, when everyone who's traveled is off the planes and things quiet down for another couple weeks before you get that Christmas rush, that's a great time to go to New Orleans. The Christmas decorations are starting to go up. You still get a great look at what New Orleans is outside of holiday season. And the weather is a little variable. So it can be in the 70s. It could also be in the 50s. So you have to kind of look and see what the track of the weather is before you pack your bag. But it is relatively quiet. You get to hear great music without tons of crowds of people. You get into the best restaurants without having to worry about too many reservations. And that I go every year at that time.
Excellent. One thing that makes you laugh and say only in New Orleans.
Okay, so last fall when I was in New Orleans, I was there a couple days before my husband, so I just every morning got out and went for a run before my friends were ready to have breakfast. We don't really have breakfast there until like 10. And so I went for a run through the Marigny and the Bywater, and I had to stop when outside a cafe on a little iron cafe chair, I saw a piglet that was sitting in the chair in front of a table that had a cup of coffee. I didn't see a person around. And that's one of those things where you go, yes, of course, this belongs here.
It was probably chicory coffee too. So.
Oh, yes.
Last two questions.
Yeah.
You really know you're in New Orleans when what?
A couple things. I would say you really know you're in New Orleans when you can walk from music club to music club, or bar to music club, or restaurant to bar to music club, and be able to not have to finish your drink before you leave the establishment, but have them pour it into a plastic Go cup and be able to take your drink from one place to the next, or just sit on the sidewalk. Because as long as it's in aluminum, like a can, or in a plastic cup, just not in glass, you can walk around with your drink.
Huh. Okay. Never heard of that anywhere else before.
No.
And if you had to summarize New Orleans in just 3 words, what 3 words would you give us?
Well, my personal way to summarize it in 3 words is my heart home. I live outside of San Francisco, and I grew up in this area, and I love San Francisco. But whenever I land in New Orleans, I just feel so at home.
Excellent. Our guest again has been Jill Robinson from dangerjillrobinson.com. Is there other places that you would recommend to people who want to go read about your travels, Jill?
I write regularly for the San Francisco Chronicle travel section, Afar, National Geographic Traveler, as well as a lot of other travel print magazines, including in-flight magazines like American Way.
And your favorite New Orleans story that you've written recently?
My favorite New Orleans story that I've written that people can read before August would be my Treme story in the San Francisco Chronicle, which ran in April.
Excellent. And that should be, you should be able to find that online as well.
Yes. It just, actually, if you can't find it through a search, you can go to my website and I have a page that lists writing and you can find it listed on my page.
Excellent. Jill, thank you for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your love, or should we say obsession, with New Orleans.
It's a fair thing to say. Thank you so much for having me. I always love talking about New Orleans.
In news of the community, I heard recently from Pam, who had a critique about the show. I just listened to your Greece podcast. Very good, except I think when you have a guest telling about sites of various places, if they have an accent, you should repeat the names of the cities or attractions that they mention. The Italian guest was fantastic, except when she mentioned an attraction, I couldn't understand her, and you never mentioned the place, so it was lost. Thanks, Pam. And I apologize, Pam, first of all. And generally, I try and repeat that if I didn't think it was clear. So I may have thought she was more clear than you did. So my apologies for that. But also 2 resources I would recommend. One is the show notes. In the show notes, we try and get a lot of those places written down and then actually linked off to an article about them. And so if the place sounds interesting, really do go to the show notes, or even in the enhanced version, we have those same links. So that's something to be aware of. And then now that we are transcribing every episode, thanks to our friends at J-Way Travel, who are experts in Eastern European travel, I should mention, because of that, about a month and a half to 2 months after the show comes out, we have a transcription of the show, and that usually has some more information as well. So just wanted to mention those 2 resources. I also heard from former guest on the show, Spencer Kwong, who said, Chris Christensen, thank you for taking us around the world for 10 years. Recently, I've been researching 2 out-of-the-mainstream trips to Micronesia and Croatia, and the first place I went was your website. What I have found amazing is that you have taken us far and wide on an average of 47 times in a year. I really appreciate all the time you spend putting together such great podcasts and sharing the information on your websites, social media, etc., etc. Spencer, you are welcome. And then if I didn't mention in the last comment, the reason why our show notes have correct information and link off to interesting places is the other person who's putting in a lot of work is Jeffrey, our editor. With that, we're going to end this episode of The Amateur Traveler. If you have questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Pinterest, or Instagram at Chris2X, and as always, thanks so much for listening.
Got to see one